In this video, I'll show you how to take 4 separate images and combine them to form a new composite image. I'm using Affinity Photo 2.2. This man will be the main theme. This is a stock JPEG file I downloaded from the web, so the first thing I'll do is save this as an Affinity project file. From the File menu, I'll choose Save As. And I'll call it Composite Image. Next, I'll add a rectangle to use as a guide. I'll cover about 2/3 of the image with it. The corner of the room will be positioned along its right side. This will also help me keep the wall straight. I'll set its color to something other than white so it stands out. You'll see why in a moment. Clicking on any of the colors over here will do that. Now I'll drag the new rectangle layer below the image layer. With this one portrait photo, I'll create a corner of a room, so there will be 2 walls, a floor, and a ceiling, all using this same photo. I'll use the Perspective Live filter to accomplish that. You can also use the Perspective tool here on the sidebar if you wish. Using the Live filter version has the advantage of being non-destructive, and you can go back and easily make adjustments to it at any time. Making sure the portrait photo layer is selected, I'll click on the Live Filters icon down here and select Perspective from the menu. The image has been surrounded by a white rectangle with tiny square nodes at each corner. I'll use these nodes to adjust the image by grabbing them with the mouse and moving them. Notice also the Live Perspective dialog. I'll leave mode set to destination. It can also be set to source. I haven't fully figured out how that setting works, so I can't say anything about it. Fortunately, I won't be needing it. You can also show a grid, which might be handy in some situations. I'll leave it unchecked. And clicking these 2 icons, rotate the image either clockwise or counterclockwise. Okay, I'll start constructing our little room. I'll start by grabbing the top right corner node and pulling it over to the edge of the rectangle I added earlier. You can now see why I changed its color to something other than white. Now I'll grab the bottom right corner node and do the same. I'll take a moment to adjust it. This will be the first of 2 walls. That looks fine. I don't need the rectangle anymore, so I'll delete it by selecting its layer and clicking on the trash can at the bottom of the Layers panel. I'm going to load the photo of our model again to create the opposing wall. From the File menu, I'll choose Open and select the file. By default, it's opened into a new document. I want this to be a mirror image of the wall I just added, so I'll select Flip Horizontal from the Document menu. To bring this into the new composite image, I'll copy it by pressing Command-C or Control-C in Windows. I can also choose Copy from the Edit menu. I'll switch to the composite image by clicking its tab with the mouse, and press Command-V or Control-V in Windows to paste the image. Or I can choose Paste from the Edit menu. I'll apply a Perspective Live filter to this image as well. I'll grab the top left corner node and drag it to meet the corner of the other wall. And the same with the bottom left corner node. I'll zoom right in by holding down the Command or Control key in Windows and tapping the plus sign key. I want to make sure the corners line up and there is no white space between the 2 walls. I'm going to turn off snapping because it might hinder my ability to make adjustments. I'll uncheck the horseshoe magnet up here on the toolbar. I'll press Command 0 or Control 0 in Windows to zoom back out to the default view. I'll close the perspective dialog to get rid of the surrounding white rectangle so I can see better. Everything lines up and there's no white space between the two walls. Okay, that's great. Now I'll add the floor. The image is still available in the clipboard, so I'll just paste it in. I'll apply the Perspective Live filter and adjust the image. I'll zoom out by holding down Command or Control in Windows and tapping the minus key to get a better look. I have to be strategic in how I do this. It'll take a couple of steps, not as easy as forming the two walls, as the image becomes too contorted. To get the right perspective, I'll try to form a perfect rectangle. I'll zoom in to make sure there's no gaps and everything lines up. I'll close the perspective dialog to commit. Now the ceiling, same thing as with the floor basically. Again, I want to form a perfect rectangle for the right perspective. And there's the basic room, or corner of a room. I'd like the two walls and floor and ceiling to each have a different color tone. I'll do that by applying a separate gradient map adjustment to the respective layers. I'll click the adjustments icon and select gradient map. I'll drag the new gradient map adjustment layer over the first layer I added until that layer becomes highlighted and release it. The gradient map is now a child of that layer, so its effect will be limited to that layer only. In the gradient map dialog, you can see a band of three colors: red, green, and blue. This means the gradient map is mapping red into the shadows of the image, green into the midtones, and blue into the highlights. I have another video that explains this adjustment in detail. I'll leave a link to it in the description. The first thing I like to do with this adjustment is reduce its opacity to about 50% so I have an idea of what it's going to look like. I never use the full opacity setting with this adjustment, but feel free to do so if you like. For this first wall, I'll leave the shadows as red. I'll delete the midtones node by clicking on it with the mouse to select it and then clicking the delete button. And I'll set the highlights to light blue by clicking on the highlights node to select it and then clicking on color. I'll set the blend mode to color burn and reduce opacity to about 46%. I planned this out earlier to save time, but do experiment with different blend modes and opacity settings when using this adjustment. Now the opposing wall. Again, I'll make the gradient map a child layer. This time I'll set shadows to violet. I'll delete the midtones node as before. And I'll set highlights to light green. I'll set blend mode to darker color. And set opacity to about 25%. And the floor. Shadows to blue. delete the midtones node, and highlights the light green. Blend mode will be reflect. And opacity about 56%. And the ceiling quickly. Orange in the shadows. Remove the midtones node, and I'll leave the highlights as blue. Blend mode will be color burn, and opacity around 56%. Okay, now I'm ready to add some shadows to enhance the perspective and give the image more of a 3D effect. I'll do that by adding a fill layer and setting its color to black. I'll then apply an empty mask to the fill layer to render it invisible. Then, using a gray brush, I'll paint in the shadows in the corners and along the wall edges. From the layer menu, I'll select New Fill Layer. I'll set its color to black by clicking over here. I'll change its name to Shadows. This will make it easier to locate later on. I'll just double-click where it says Fill and type in the new name and press Return. To apply the empty mask, I'll select New Empty Mask Layer from the Layer menu. It's important to note that this fill layer must be above the wall, floor, and ceiling layers. Otherwise, the shadows will not be visible when I paint them in. I'll expand the fill layer to ensure the mask indented beneath is selected. Now I'll click on the Brushes tab to select a brush type. From the drop-down, I'll select Masking. I'll select a brush with a fuzzy or soft outline because I don't want my shadows to be sharply defined around the edges. This brush right here will do. I'll click on the Layers tab again. I'll select the Paintbrush tool over on the sidebar. And I'll make sure hardness is set to 0 up here. Using the square bracket keys, I'll adjust the size of the brush. I'll start in the corner here. I'll set the brush color to light gray. That will let more of the fill layer show through, creating a darker shadow. Now I'll go around the edges of the ceiling and floor. I'll adjust the size of the brush and use a darker gray color for a lighter shadow. If you make a mistake, you can easily erase it by changing the brush color to black, a handy feature of masks. I'll touch up the corner a bit more. I'll adjust the shade of gray and paint outside of the darker shadow for a blending effect. That looks much better. Now for the second image of this composite. I'll choose Open from the File menu to select it. I'll extract the TV set from this image and paste it into the composite. In order to extract it, I first have to select it. The Selection Brush tool will do the job. I'll adjust its size with the square bracket keys. To select the TV, I'll click on it with the brush. I'll click Refine up on the toolbar to refine the selection and check for errors. The selected area looks normal while the unselected area is cast in red. The selection looks good, so I'll click Apply. Now I'll copy the selection, switch back to the composite image, and paste the selection there, just like I did with the photo of the man. I'll use the Move tool to resize and position the TV set. That looks about right. I'll adjust its perspective so it fits into the image better. I'll apply a perspective live filter. I'm trying to make it look like it's angled into the corner. Alright, I think a 3D effect would be nice. I'll select the TV layer and click on the FX icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. I'll simply put a check mark in 3D. There are various options here on the right. The set looks fine as is, so I won't bother with them, but do take the time to experiment with them on your own. The TV is still not really fitting in. The lighting and color are all wrong. I'll try to fix that with a curves adjustment. I'll make the curves adjustment a child of the TV layer to limit its effect to that layer only. I'll start by looking for a good blend mode. I think color burn is good. I'll make some adjustments to see if I can make it look even better. Okay, that looks great. I think our man belongs on TV. I'll click on the tab containing his photo. First, I'll flip it horizontally again to get back to the original image. Now I'll copy the entire image and paste it into the composite. With the Move tool, I'll resize and position the image over the TV screen. To make it appear as though he's on TV, I'll use a mesh warp to start. It's ideal for placing images onto curved surfaces like a television screen. There's a mesh warp tool and a live filter version. You can access the tool version here on the sidebar. I'll use the live filter version since it's non-destructive. Making sure the image layer is selected, I'll click on the live filters icon and select mesh warp. I'll zoom in so I can see better. As with the perspective live filter, the image has been surrounded by a white rectangle with tiny square nodes at each corner. I'll grab the nodes and position the image onto the screen. You can grab any part of the rectangle and adjust the image. You can also double-click anywhere on the image to add a node. I'll undo all that by pressing Command-Z or Control-Z in Windows. I'll click on one of the square nodes. Notice the tiny handles that have appeared. They're called curvature handles. I'll use them to fit the image onto the TV screen. If the handles are not visible or disappear, just click on a node to make them appear. I'm not too worried about distorting the image. I think that looks okay. I'll click Done in the upper left corner to commit the changes. I have another video that covers mesh warp in more detail. I'll leave a link to it in the description. The image is now fitted onto the screen, but it looks pretty fake. A different blend mode should fix that. I'll make sure the image layer is selected and try out some blend modes. Soft light looks good, but overlay makes the image stand out more, so I'll use that. I think some static would be a good idea. Bad reception would be fitting. I'll apply an Add Noise Live filter. I'll turn up intensity to around 50% or so. As a last touch, I'll add a shadow along the right side of the set. I'll make sure the shadow layer's mask is selected. The TV set layer is above the shadows layer, but that's okay since the shadow will be behind and to the right of the set, so it will be visible. I'll select the paintbrush and use a light gray color. This ugly room needs a houseplant. I'll load the file. This has a transparent background, so no selection is necessary. The light is coming from the left in the composite image, so I'll have to flip this horizontally so its shadow is on its right instead of its left. I'll select Flip Horizontal from the document menu. Now I'll copy the image and paste it into the composite. I'll size and position the plant with the Move tool. Right about there works. A 3D effect would look good. I'll add a curves adjustment to help it fit in. I'll look for a blend mode. Overlay is okay. I'll play with the curves adjustment a bit. That's looking good. A light source, that's to say a light bulb, will be a nice finishing touch. I'll open that file. I'll select it with the Selection Brush tool. I'll click Refine. I'll apply that and copy the image over. Again, the Move tool to position and size it. In keeping with everything else, I'll add a 3D effect. Again, just checking the 3D option is good enough. Now a curves adjustment. Color burn looks good. For realistic effect, I'll add a glow around the bulb. I'll do that the same way I did the shadows by using a fill layer and mask. I'll add the new fill layer and drag it beneath the light bulb layer. I'll name it Light Bulb Glow. To set its color, I'll use the color picker on the color panel in the upper right of the screen. First, I'll make sure the new fill layer is selected. I'll click on the color picker icon with the mouse and drag it over to the light bulb to sample its color. I like this color here, so I'll release the mouse to sample it. To set the fill layer color, I'll click on this tiny circle beside the color picker. As with the shadow layer, I'll apply an empty mask. I'll expand the fill layer to make sure the mask is selected. I'll grab the paintbrush and adjust its size. I'll position it over the light bulb so I can see what it's going to look like. I'll adjust the shade of gray to get the right glow effect. Just one click of the mouse is enough to add an ambient glow. The houseplant needs some light bulb glow as well. I'll use a darker gray. I'll add a shadow for the houseplant too. For the sake of realism, even though this is far from realistic, I'll place a reflection of the light bulb onto the TV screen. The light bulb is still in the clipboard, so I'll just paste it in again and resize it with the Move tool. I'll change its blend mode so it looks more realistic. Color dodge is good. Now a curves adjustment to match it to the first light bulb. I'll use the same color burn blend mode. I'll use a mesh warp since it's on the curved surface of the TV screen. I'll make sure the light bulb layer is selected and apply the mesh warp. I'll zoom in and make some adjustments. Something like that will do. I'll click Done in the upper left to commit the changes. I'll adjust the opacity to make it look like a faint reflection. Not great, but all right. It illustrates the technique. So there it is, a composite made up of 4 separate images. Not tasteful, but fun to make. I hope you'll be able to make use of some or all of the techniques I employed here in your own composite images. Thank you for watching.